You know, if you want to change your mindset, you have to be willing to change it. That sounds obvious, doesn't it? But I find there are times where we want something different, but we actually don't realize that there's a part of us that doesn't want to change, isn't willing to be what we need to be. For example, in the collision, there was a point in time during recovery where I had to take on most of the responsibilities for the family. And it was just the circumstances of our healing and what was going on with us. And of course, on the surface, I was glad to do that. I was happy to do what I needed to help the family to heal and recover and to get through this crisis. But I became aware of a resistance to that there was part of me that really didn't seem to want to do it. And I was growing resentment towards my wife and the kids sometimes for not doing their part. And as I examined that, of course, I realized, well, that doesn't make sense because we're dealing with injuries and recovery. So what was it? Well, deeper inside me, I was holding on to this mindset, this collection of ideas that could be summarized as, it's not supposed to be this way. This isn't right. This is not what I signed up for. Part of me was crying out against it, saying this because it's not right. And I was right. That's not the way it was supposed to be. It's not what we signed up for. And my wife would say the same thing. This isn't what we agreed to when we said I do. Well, it is. We agreed to stick with each other through thick and thin. But we weren't planning on something like this. And so I had to examine that and recognize that in these circumstances at this moment, dealing with the reality that we're dealing with, I had to do some things differently, and it was okay. I'd give myself permission to do things differently and to recognize that. But I also noticed then that there was this deeper concern. It felt like I was changing who I am. And I don't know if you've ever felt that before. But I felt like in order to do what needed to be done, I had to be a different person. And at first, I didn't like that. I thought, well, no, I need to be true to me, right? Isn't that what's the most important, being true to myself? Well, yes, I think it is important. I also recognize that we change over time, don't we? Even though we don't always notice it, we're not the same as we were when we were children. We've learned and grown and developed new skills and hopefully some new attitudes and behaviors. There's a part of us that stays the same, but I think a lot of us changes. And what I recognized then, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, is that we do have to become a different person. And in a crisis like this collision recovery, it had to be deliberate and thoughtful. Normally we just kind of change and grow and develop without realizing it, I think, most of the time. But I've recognized that I can take control. I can decide that I want to be this kind of person and to do these kinds of behaviors and to think these kinds of thoughts. This is important, not only in a crisis, but this tells us that we can do this even when things are good. Maybe you want to make a change in your career, improve yourself in terms of what kind of a friend you are to people, or what kind of a parent or spouse you are. You can choose to do things differently and to become a different person. It's within your power to do so. And this is critical. But you need to be willing to become something different. And that's where we're at. So in the last few weeks, we've focused on pillars of change for me that I have found most important. It's the awareness that there is a problem, if that's what you're dealing with, awareness of what the problem is. Then there's looking at our thoughts and feelings and how they work together to A, give us clarity on the problem, and B, help us to find solutions and ways forward. And then finally today we've looked at the willingness to become something different, hopefully something better. And when you put all that together, it applies both to the positive and the negative scenarios of life. We can choose to take it on, or we can just allow it to happen by default. But I think if you're listening to this, you're someone who wants to choose to take control and make those choices for yourself and make decisions that are take you to new places and better places. So thank you for joining me so far for laying this foundation. Now I want to look ahead to the weeks coming up, and we'll explore different ways to apply these principles and how they work in different situations.